そういう思いの中で自民党総裁選挙には出馬をしない、こうしたことを申し上げました。
Less than a year after becoming Prime Minister of world's third largest economy, Japanese Prime Minister Yoshihide Suga announced on last Friday, that's on the 3rd of September, that he would not seek re-election as the head of its governing party, the Liberal Democratic Party (LDP). But who was Suga, who effectively ended his tenure and the top job only after a year? Mr. Suga, 72 years old, the son of a strawberry farmer and a school teacher, had been one of the leading faces of the governing LDP, which has dominated Japanese politics for decades now. Mr. Suga assumed the prime ministership after Shinzo Abe, Japan's longest-serving prime minister, resigned in August 2020 because of ill health. But Japan's struggle with coronavirus makes Mr. Suga a unique leader of a large developed country to resign because of the pandemic. But then the polls tend to suggest he struggled to connect with the public, that he looked uncomfortable as a public-facing leader. But then his resignation is not concerning one political party or as a political leader alone. But the bigger question is, what does this mean for Japanese politics with the general elections due later this year? But first, let us understand why has Mr. Suga made this decision now, and where does this leave the ruling LDP? Suga's decision to resign was an abrupt change of course, of course. The fifth COVID wave in Japan, triggered by the Delta variant, and the poor crisis communication has been under his watch. This led to declining support both within his party and among the public. This jeopardizes LDP's prospects of winning the upcoming elections, surely something which the ruling party could not afford. In his tenure, he never fully emerged from the shadow of his predecessor Shinzo Abe. Even a year into his rule, he still seems like a caretaker leader. But it's worth noting that he was the leader who conducted Japan's very strong performance at the Tokyo Olympics, even after it got delayed by a year. But the decision to conduct this very Olympics was not supported by the majority of the Japanese masses. It was a deeply unpopular decision. His approval ratings slid throughout the summer, reaching record lows and this week plunging below 30%. Suga stepped down in order to improve LDP's chances of maintaining this power. Then the next big question would be, who would replace Prime Minister Suga? Speculations within the party suggest two candidates to keep an eye on. That are Vaccine Prime Minister Taro Kono and Fumio Kishida, Japan's former Minister for Foreign Affairs. Though Japan is considered a mature democracy, the LDP has dominated post-war politics. But even then, in this country, power keeps passing back and forth between the conservative LDP and the progressive Democratic Party of Japan, that's the DPJ. Looking into all of these, 2021 elections look very unpredictable at this moment, and that's for sure. Coming back to the bigger question then, what does this mean in terms of political stability in Japan? Why do Japanese Prime Minister keep resigning? Why is Japan different? Why do top officials in senior government posts resign office seemingly at a drop of the hat? The theories are endless, most of them relying on the often repeated but simplistic stereotypes about the supposed centrality of honor, saving face, and in respect of Japanese culture. The poll numbers had dropped, the parliament had split, and according to resignation announcements, their unpopularity had made either the Prime Minister or the government itself unable to effectively govern. Since the 2000s, Japan has had 10 different Prime Ministers. That's 21 years and 10 different Prime Ministers. And Shinzo Abe was the Prime Minister for 9 of those years, of those 21 years. And it's said in Japanese culture that when faced with difficulty, leaders quit to protect their honor. Others say this is because the Japanese political system demands for an accountability. If opinion polls rejects a leader, they do not wait around for elections, they just resign simply. There is no consensus on why Japan's prime ministers are so frail when it comes to continuing leadership. Some put it down to the fact that ultimate stability resides in emperor, and dismissing a prime minister is no more traumatic than changing the coach of a basketball team. Others point out that the post-war education system, prime ministers have relatively low salaries, little authority even within the cabinet, and limited terms. Whatever it is, the Japan still faces a similar crisis. At present, the LDP's core competency is to preserve its power as the ruling party. Suga's decision serves to avoid internal instability and enables an orderly succession. In light of the public frustration with his cabinet, declining approval ratings, the LDP's internal support for Suga was flagging. Had Suga stayed on, the LDP would have likely stayed in power but would have lost seats in the election. This would have made governing more difficult and increased the political instability that would have accompanied. So by resigning, what Suga has done is sent a message. The LDP will take the crisis response seriously through renewal at the top while making sure the party does not split further. As a result of the frustration with his cabinet, public attention now rests on LDP's internal maneuvering with little focus on opposition parties' policy platforms.